And if you have any professional conversation, you still can carry it outside and drink some coffee. I would like to welcome you in this afternoon session. It's the second session, and we have here two esteemed colleagues, Ms. Edith Flahiv and Dr. Rayana Dakhinat. I welcome them both here in Bahrain, and I welcome them both here at our conference. The first presentation shall be presented by Ms. Edith Flahiv. She is a member of the English faculty at the Abu Dhabi Men's College. Prior to that, she worked with young learners in the UAE. She also taught in Ireland and Spain. Her research interests include learner autonomy, classroom methodologies, and leadership. She is currently completing her PhD in education at the University of Leicester. Join me to welcome Ms. Edith Flahiv, who will talk today about teachers' perceptions of principals, leadership, behavior in the UAE.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Sorry. Sorry, Dr. Difficult. Sorry. Where is the full screen in this one? I don't have my own laptop. It's there. Oh, it's there. Oh, it's fine from here. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming today to my presentation. As the doctor said, I work at Abu Dhabi Men's College, but prior to that, I spent a lot of time in schools. So I have been on both sides of the coin, so to speak. I've been a teacher and worked in leadership as well. So today I'm trying to bring the focus of all that experience to you, and I hope that I can empower you and give you some food for thought as you leave today. So very quickly, I'm going to look at some of the literature that is pertinent in the field of educational leadership and management, and I'm going to particularly focus on mistakes and ineffective behaviours that are practiced by principals, unfortunately, because that's the focus of my research. I'm going to look at the type of leadership style that prevails in schools in the UAE, and it probably is characteristic of most of the schools in the GCC countries. And then, based on my findings, I'm going to make some recommendations as to how principals can improve their practices and therefore improve the teaching and learning in their schools and their colleges. So there are many, many definitions of leadership offered in research and offered. I've picked the ones that I consider most relevant and most pertinent. So here are a few, but the wealth of literature on leadership is extensive. So first of all, I'd like to refer to what Bennis and Nannis advise, that managers are people who do things right, and leaders are people who do the right thing. Bush says that there is no agreed definition of the concept of leadership, while Yockel argues that the definition of leadership is arbitrary and very subjective. Finally, Northfield, when summing up all the literature in the field of leadership, stresses, and this is key to the whole study, for the principal as for any educative leader, the key features are the leader as learner, providing opportunities for participants to develop personal understanding and encouraging the conditions for reflection in practice. Now, once again, I've referred to the wealth of literature that exists in this field of educational leadership and management. So some of the skills required for educational leaders are as follows. Sass and Stanton refer to interpersonal communication skills, human relations, and leadership as being the most important. While Harrell, Harrison, Hutchinson, Ross, and Jolly also cite human relations and interpersonal skills as the most important skills educational leaders need to conduct their leadership in today's very important school climates. Now I'm going to look at some of the flawed leadership behaviours exhibited by principals, by school leaders, and by supervisors. Bullock in 1998 conducted a study, this is carried out in the States, where he assessed 51 school leaders, and he concluded that 50% of these had weaknesses in human relations. Again, Kramer conducted 35 studies, and he had similar findings. Finally, Hogan, Raskin, and Fazzini investigated 3 types of flawed leadership, and they concluded that individuals could possess well-developed social skills and an attractive interpersonal style, yet they could still exhibit flawed leadership behaviours. Now, the most extensive research conducted in this area of leadership was that by Bullock, Booth, and Pickett in 1998, when they surveyed 375 teachers. And as a result of their extensive research, they produced 15 categories of perceived mistakes practiced by principals. So let's take a look at these, and maybe you can identify with some of them, and maybe you can think about how you could counteract these mistakes in your leadership. So first of all, once again, the very important area of human relation skills. Poor interpersonal communication skills, a lack of vision, failure to lead, avoidance of conflict, lack of knowledge about instruction or the curriculum, a control orientation, lack of ethics or character, forgetting what it's like to be a teacher, inconsistency, showing favoritism, failure to hold staff accountable, failure to follow through, making snap judgments, and finally, interrupting instruction with public address announcements. Now, other ineffective behaviours that were cited in literature were the following: lack of openness and trust, failure to circulate with staff, not calling teachers by their names, failure to delegate, failure to compliment staff, and failure to motivate and empower staff. Now I'm going to look at the leadership style that prevails in schools in the UAE, and as I said, possibly characterises most of the leadership styles in the schools here and in other countries. So the leadership style is characterised or described as transactional, which means the following: the leader or leadership team sets the standards, in other words, top-down management. Commitment is implicit in the role, so individuals are expected to follow the system and obey the rules as such. Positive and negative feedback is given from above, and finally, the system seeks efficiency in meeting targets. Now, when I conducted this research, there were 100 teachers involved, most of them working in private and government schools in the UAE. They were primary school teachers and secondary school teachers. I had taught in the system myself, so I could empathise and I understood where these teachers were coming from. And basically, when I left the system and moved to higher education, I always thought about going back and doing some kind of research, action research, based on what I'd heard from colleagues saying all the time. Oh, my principal doesn't do this, my principal doesn't do that. So I decided to do something about it, take a survey the teachers, and find out exactly what they meant. So the instrument I used to collect the data was a survey that was devised by Bullock, Booth, and Michael in 1999. And the survey comprises 48 behaviours, as they're called. 19 of those behaviours are positive and 29 are called negative behaviours. Now, this is available on the internet. You'll find it on Google very easily. So the participants were asked to respond on a Likert 5-point scale, ranging from never, which was scored as a 1, to always, which was scored as a 5, about how their principals practice the behaviour, how often or always they practice these. And negative behaviours then were reversely scored. Now, I'll just open the document here. Right, so this is a quick glance at the survey instrument. It has 48 behaviours, as I said, and it's readily available on Google. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much.
No, that's okay.
Excuse me? Sorry. I'm sorry. I want to move on to my next slide now.
So it's on slide number.
I think it was 8 or 9. So, yeah. And further.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you. Sorry about that. So, as I said, this survey instrument has been tried and tested, and it is a valid measurement of principals' behaviours. So the findings of this, then, in order to analyse the survey, the behaviours are actually categorised into 5 different domains, as they're called. So the survey is categorised into human relations, trust, instructional leadership, control, and conflict. It's stuck. Doesn't like my presentation. Thank you. I just need to open this now. Sorry, technology today doesn't like my presentation. So, an analysis of the data arising out of this survey, when I analysed the data, I found that the principals in this study indicated they had flawed leadership behaviours in 3 specific domains. So the first one was the domain of human relations, the second one was in the domain of trust, and the third and final one was in the domain of instructional leadership. Now, once again, I'm not going to open these documents because I might freeze the whole presentation. So I'm just going to talk about, first of all, the whole area of human relations. There are 13 items in this domain, so they measure principals' interpersonal skills and their levels of interaction with their teachers. Now, the only behaviour in this domain that the principals scored very highly on was that of supporting teachers when parents are involved. But in contrast to that, 50% of respondents acknowledge that their principals only sometimes demonstrate a caring attitude and only sometimes provide positive reinforcement. Also, the negative behaviours of not listening, remaining very distant, and telling teachers to make do with what they have were practised hugely. So this suggests that principals need to increase their positive behaviours in this domain and decrease their negative behaviours. As McEwen says, successful principals are communicating virtually 100% of the time that they are on the job. Reading, speaking, writing, and listening. So the whole area of interpersonal skills and human relations is very, very important in the life of a principal. Now, the second area is that of trust. In this domain, there were 11 different items measuring the levels of trust between the principal and the teachers. Again, here, the most positive score was 70% of teachers indicated that their principals never gossiped about them to other teachers. But on the contrary, 60% said that their principals sometimes used coercion to motivate them. And finally, 50% said that their principals often displayed a lack of trust, which is quite concerning. These data suggest that the principals need to build trust, which according to Saxel, Miles and Lieberman is the most important skill that leaders need to improve organisations. And finally, in Table 3, instructional leadership, there were 10 items measured in this domain, and once again, principals some of the principals, some of the teachers acknowledged that their principals were not always knowledgeable about the curriculum or not always knowledgeable about instruction. 40% of the respondents said that their principals only knew very little about the curriculum and about instructional strategies, while 30% said that their principals often didn't provide any feedback regarding their teaching. So once again, these data would suggest that principals are focusing on managerial tasks and, shirking the role of instructional leader, which is very, very important. So Murphy and Hallinger also state that in most schools, curriculum and instruction are managed by default, and this is reflected in this study. If administrators want to be instructional leaders, they will have to pay more attention to what is going on in the classroom. So, moving on.
5 minutes reminder.
How to avoid these career-ending mistakes. What do we do to avoid these? So Davis suggests the following 6 points very quickly. Evaluate and refine your interpersonal skills. How do you do that? Keep a diary or keep a log of your strengths and weaknesses and work on those. Understand how you perceive the world around you. Again, as I said, attend leadership courses, look at other principals who are perhaps practicing these who are perhaps addressing these leadership issues and see how they deal with them. Don't let your past successes become failures. In other words, continue with best practice while you work on your weaknesses. Look for organizational indicators that your leadership may be faltering. If you feel that your leadership is taking a turn in the wrong direction, well then get your teachers together and get them to advise you. Hold focus groups, ask your teachers to identify what your strengths and weaknesses are and then work on those. And then after a month, reflect on them and have a feedback session again with your teachers. Be assertive in developing a professional growth plan. Sit with your superiors or your top managers and set goals and targets for yourself. And then review those at regular intervals and modify them as necessary. Finally, recognize the handwriting on the wall by making the first move. Again, attend conferences, keep up to date, as Professor Dimmock said today, keep up to date with leadership best practices, because it's very important, as he said, as Professor Dimmock said this morning, that research informs policy and practice. So we have to keep up to date as teachers and as leaders in the whole area of research so that we can make sure that our practices in the classrooms have are everything they should be. Finally, McEwan recommends the following. Establish, implement, and achieve academic standards. So again, set standards for your teachers and make sure that they're followed through and implemented. Be an instructional source for your staff. So you're a resource for your staff. You should be okay with the curriculum, with instruction and everything. Create a learning-centered culture and climate. So whatever about creating it, as Professor Dimmock said, the important thing is to sustain it as well. Communicate your school vision and mission to staff and students. Set high but attainable expectations for your staff and for yourself. Remember, you lead by example. Develop educator leaders, in other words, delegate, empower your staff, empower your teachers so that they can take over some leadership positions in the future. And finally, develop and maintain positive relationships with students, staff, and parents. Now, the limitations of these research, there are a few, but basically the biggest limitation was that it lacked a qualitative component. And again, I'm going to quote Professor Dimmock this morning, who said that mixed methods research is probably the best way to go if we're conducting research. And finally, these are what I call my 10 principles for principals, food for thought. Taking the whole leadership acronym, I said, first of all, we need to listen, very, very important. Listen to your staff. Empathize, and by that I mean, don't forget what it's like to be a teacher. Many of you have come from the classroom yourselves and moved into leadership roles, and if you haven't, don't lock yourself in a glass cage or in an office. Get out there, move around your staff, and make sure that you know what's happening on the ground and at the chalk face. Advise, of course. You wear many different hats. You're a motivator, you're a role model, you're an advisor, you're a mentor, you're a facilitator. So you should advise your staff, particularly new and young staff who come, and maybe staff who are coming from different cultures. Develop your staff, promote them, give them professional development opportunities so they can move forward and grow as professionals. Empower and motivate your staff. Respect staff from all different cultures, very important. Share, and by share I mean transparency in your leadership. If you have meetings with your top managers, please cascade the information to staff. Don't wait for them to hear it second or third hand. They don't like that. Help and support your staff in their individual endeavours, and this could even be outside the classroom. This could be in their personal lives. Staff often need support if they're going through problems in their lives. Inspire. Again, as I said, be a role model for your staff. Inspire. Your staff will walk in your shoes, and by that I don't mean Jimmy shoes or Christian Louboutins. I mean they'll follow you as a role model. And finally, praise. The very, very important words of praise. We praise our students all the time, but we find sometimes we don't get praise ourselves as teachers. Principals forget how important a few words of praise are. Praise can put a smile on a person's face, uplift them, motivate them, and push them forward, and help them and empower them to become better teachers in the classroom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edith, for the insightful presentation. There were foods for thoughts, that's for sure. And I wonder how similar those perceptions are when it comes to the Bahraini concept that the teachers are holding for their leadership. I would leave the judgment for the audience to think about it, and maybe for our teacher researchers here to investigate the issue in the future. You were prompt on time. Well done. Thank you. The second presentation for today is from Dr. Rayana Dakhinat. She is an assistant professor at the Bahrain Teachers College in the University of Bahrain. Her expertise is in language development, including foreign languages. Prior to joining BTC, she has been part of many collaborative funded research from Merit of Discipline in UK. One among these studies investigated the effect of parents' interaction with their infants on the development of their baby's language. Since September 2012, she has been heavily involved in different teacher training programs at BTC. I would leave you now with a presentation titled Parent-Infant Interaction and Language Development, and Dr. Rayana. Join me to welcome her, please.
Is it this one? Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to be here today, and so delighted to represent BTC at this so important conference. And my presentation today is just like my friend over here. It does fit into the main theme of this conference, which is sustainability, but in another aspect of it. Parent-infant interaction and child's language development has been the topic of literature review that we were involved in actually a few years ago, before actually I joined BTC and come to Bahrain, with some scholars from UK. Actually, I just want to correct that Professor Keith Toppin is not from Bahrain Teachers College, but he's from the University of Dundee. I wish he could join us today. But I do have a message for you from him that I will share at the end of this presentation. Okay, so this presentation is going to be organized in terms of answering these key questions. Why does communicating with babies matter? What are the most effective ways of encouraging parents and carers to communicate with babies? And the third one, what gets in the way of parents and carers communicating with babies and young children. This research has been tasked by the National Literacy Trusts in UK. They wanted us to answer these questions because they wanted some evidence with regards to the positiveness of the effect of the interaction between parents and babies from 0 to 3 in terms of getting the children ready for their school or school life. So let's start with the research methodology. I'm not going to go in details with it, but if you wish, you can actually download the paper and go through it because it's quite complex. But what we did, I just summarized it over here. We looked at 7 electronic databases: Scopus, PubMed, ERIC, ScienceDirect, Psychological Abstracts, Web Knowledge, and Social Science Citation Index. As you see, we didn't only focus on, for example, literature from education only or linguistics only, but we tried actually to embrace many disciplines that do have a hand in terms of the development of the child from 0 to 3. We searched literature produced in and after 1986. The focus, of course, was on parent-infant interaction developing the language from 0 to 3. And the search yielded to 1,752 hits, but only 60 papers were selected because of their highest quality and relevance to the topic that we undertaken. So the first question, what does communicating with babies, why does it matter? I'm going here to just share with you the findings, but I wouldn't go into details of which study or who said this or that, okay? So children in most environments do learn languages, don't they? And they do it by the age of 3. In the first 3 years of schools, when they start schooling, they start actually learning how to read and write. However, if, for example, listening and speaking hasn't been developed during early childhood, it will be very difficult or maybe a little bit challenging for the teachers and any stakeholder who is involved in this to remedy, to give a remediation to this delay, for example, in speech development. So that's why early parent-child interaction does make a difference in terms of the development of the language in babies. And we have found some ways in which this works. And let's start with the first one, which is the most important one, and which is contingency. So for those who don't know, what does it mean, contingency? It's the responsiveness and sensitiveness of the child. So for example, if parent and child are in tune and do communicate with each other contingently, okay, they do communicate in better ways, okay? So the child is acquiring. So if you are contingent with your child, there is a good communication, therefore there is a better language development. We're not here talking just about the volume of talk. We can find, for example, many mothers who would be talking and talking and talking. However, the quality of talk is not there. So the child wouldn't develop his language. What we are talking here is about how you can tune with the child and how you can talk with him in order to develop his language. So of course, if you are contingent in communicating with your children, there would be an effect in vocabulary, therefore in syntax, and also in attachment, is the feeling of security, okay, in the child. And if the child feels secure, he will be responding. He will be to any stimulation that you are giving to him. So what can parents do? They can say again more correctly what the child had tried to say. They can say it in better words, and more varied words would be even better. develop what the child says, more effective than just telling the child what to do. So we are here actually encouraging the child to be more independent in terms of expressing himself. It's better than actually telling him what to do. Better explanation has been found to provide the children to be more inquisitive, to ask more questions. For example, in one of the studies, children's questions followed by satisfactory explanations from the parents, the children would be asking follow-up questions. However, if the explanations of the parents were unsatisfactory, you would find children actually re-asking the same question, or even giving their own explanation to the fact that they are not, accepting what you are telling them. So it's one of the findings there. Other factors affecting contingency, we have gender. Like, for example, mothers they are better in being contingent in short term rather than fathers. But we are a bit cautious here because 2 studies did find this. However, other 2 studies didn't find differences in gender. So mothers talk 3 times more than fathers. However, fathers, when they are interacting with their babies, especially quality talk, between 0 and 3, they found that after the age of 3, the children do have good quality talk. Okay, so fathers do matter, and we need them in terms of, interacting with their babies rather than actually only mothers. So maybe that would be, I chose to quote this, actually to mention it over here because in the Arab world, fathers sometimes actually give this, rely mostly on mothers. The other factor would be mental health. So depressed mothers don't interact contingently or at all. So children, of course, if they have depressed mothers, they will end up having speech delays, okay? And the children wouldn't feel secure as well. So you might actually, if you have been school teachers, you might have found that some of the students of pupils or, the children who attended school, they come speechless to school. It's just because actually back home, they haven't felt that feeling of attachment. They haven't had that contingent communication with their parents or immediate environment. Did you get the I should. Reminiscing as well has been found to be quite important. And what do we mean by reminiscing is to talk with children about past experiences that they had. Let's say, for example, you took them to the park, you took them to the pool, the community pool. You need to talk about those experiences with them. Use intonation, make it exciting for them. So the more it's lively, the better language they develop. Of course, elaborated conversation turns between, so let them express themselves as well, because all these are opportunities for them to develop the language. Varied words, expressions, not the same all the time. Explore cause and effect. If you do this, this will happen. Exploring people's motivation, the intention of people. So they would, know that words do carry meanings. They do carry feelings as well. Describing objects, actions, making links with other experiences, like, for example, learning how to swim in the pool, then you take them to the sea and you just remind them that it's the same thing. So they need actually to do with the same movements in a way. Making logical collection as well. You might be very surprised about the reaction of children there. They do have logic. So don't underestimate them. Don't say that because they are babies or children, toddlers, they can't think logically. That's not true. according to the research we have studied. Questioning is extremely good as well. It's extremely important. So use many who questions. Who, where, why? Let them express themselves. Avoid questions that just lead to yes and no, because there is no, how can I say it? Yeah, you don't give them the opportunity to express themselves and to develop the language in itself. Listen carefully to the child and follow his lead. Don't be bossy. Share a book, even one with no words or only pictures. Am I going fast? Yeah, sorry. Other useful things. Telling nursery rhymes, having the children join in, playing rhyming games, telling or discussing stories. You read a story, you discuss the story with them. Learning the alphabet, numbers, and letters. Learning activities outside the home, such as going to the shops, library, museum. All these opportunities do develop the language of the child from 0 to 3. Think about the nature of toys and books that you are using with them. They need to be age-related, and there are loads of these books available nowadays. So just go and explore them. Sorry about that. Now, what gets in the way of parents and carers communicating with babies? So, parents, when they have been asked, they thought that they talked more to children, but actually in reality, they were not talking that much. More parent-child talk towards end of the day. They do it a little in the morning, it's nearly dead during midday, and it peaks up late afternoon and in the evening. So it's better actually to try earlier as well. The babies do like to talk with them, throughout the whole day, whenever they are awake. More turns of conversation, better language development, of course. Please do turn the TV. It stops parent-child interaction. When you are taking your babies out, for example, use buggies that face, the child is facing you as a parent, because if they're facing you, there would be an interaction between the parent and the child, and therefore there would be development of language. Young mothers talk less and are less contingent. Young mothers, let's say, for example, in their teenage age or early 20s, they tend to talk less than others. Mothers with many adult friends interacted more with their children. Upper-class mothers talk more and give orders less. More educated parents talk more and are more contingent. Fathers are affected by mothers who are depressed, who are highly anxious and angry. If the fathers are affected by depressed mothers, of course there would be no contingent communication with babies, and therefore the child wouldn't develop his language as we wish them to. Children learning 2 languages develop language similarly to children using only 1 language. However, children learning 2 languages tend to know fewer words in each language, than the others. Low-income African-American families talk less and are less contingent, but they are good to start with, but they decline with time for some reason. Higher-income African-American families do perfectly well. Family income wasn't linked to parenting behavior at all, but what you do is more important than what you are. So try to change behavior. Role of others, siblings and peers are a source of interaction, negotiation, and joint planning. So therefore, there would be a development of language. Role of conflicts and the resolution in particular is particularly important. Girls seem to be better than boys in terms of, arguing over a problem, over something, than solving the problem itself. In non-Western cultures, communication is more likely to be polyadic. This means with many people rather than only with the mother or the father. So overhearing others and being in an environment which is rich, linguistically rich from different sources would be favorable. Some effective interventions, especially in UK. So mother-child home program, home visitors modeled for mother and child for over 2 years in disadvantaged families. They found that the 123 children were less likely to drop out from high school and more likely to graduate compared to children who didn't have that intervention. Early Head Start, effect of parenting classes on parenting behavior. So parenting classes were extremely helpful for parents to know and raise their awareness about how they should interact with their children. So they have been found that they stimulated their children's language and cognitive development and provided educational activities more than did parents who didn't participate. Speech and language therapy, so involving speech therapists was good as well. It has an effect, a good effect on developing the child's language. And finally, baby talk program, where parents followed it for half an hour daily with their children. So 110 months old with language delay, plus 4 home visits. The children could caught up with their peers after 4 months with this intervention, whereas 85% in the control group were still showing difficulties in developing language. Summary now, the first 3 years are crucial for language learning. Parents can make an enormous difference, and this is of great importance not only for children but for parents, teachers, and a range of professionals, external funders, and indeed everybody. And the message that Professor Keith has sent to you when I asked him to, if I could say something on his behalf, he said, there is no doubt that adult word count and conversational turns are key to progress. Reading to preschool infants is also an excellent way to develop their language. All best wishes. And this is the paper that we have published, if you would like actually to get more details on this topic. And thank you indeed very much for being attentive.
Very well done and very well presented paper. And it's official, guys, that finally men do matter in raising their kids. So good luck. Unfortunately, due to the time limitation and constraints, we will end the session now. If you have any questions, this is why the conference is here. It's to give you an opportunity to exchange ideas and thoughts with the speakers. So they are welcoming everyone to share your concerns and queries or suggestions, or maybe if you have an idea to develop it for further investigation or research. Thank you for your attention. I will end the break. Good luck and all the best.